All right, thank you very much for selecting this workshop. I'm very flattered that you've thought that I might have something interesting to tell you. First of all, there was a very strong message that came out to potential presenters. Don't use PowerPoint because it's really boring. So I said, okay, that's fine. I won't do PowerPoint. So I'm going to have lots of bits of paper that I'm going to pass around for you to have a look at and come up with any questions, suggestions, or stories about your own experiences of different environments. So picking up on the main theme of this conference about inspiring environments, I came to this place about a year ago and saw what was here. I came on a day when there wasn't very much happening, but you could see just from what was around the place what the atmosphere was and what people were getting up to and how inspired they'd been to make this an environment that they wanted to be in and do the things that they wanted to do. So it also reminded me of the fact that some of the people who've been involved here have come to visit us in London at various times to have a look at some of the projects that I've been around the edges of. So I can't claim any responsibility for setting up any of these projects. I work in a funding organisation, so we provide the money, and we facilitate the development of lots of activities, and I get involved with people as they're developing their ideas. So I know that some of the people in this group already have been to see some of those projects and have been inspired by them and have brought things back and turned them into something unique in their own communities. So I hope that some of you will talk about what you've done as well. So the thing that occurred to me was that we have quite a lot of projects that we've been involved in where the place that they happen is very important to the success of the project itself. So a lot of the, I would call really kind of ordinary projects happen in clinical environments. So they're things to improve the way that traditional services are run, to make things better for clients, but in a standard setting, and there isn't an attempt to change the way that things are done as a mainstream activity. There are ideas to make it better for people. So some of the projects that we funded have gone beyond that. And I'm going to give you 10 examples of projects where people have set up something to do something that's very different. You'll recognize some of them as being similar to things that happen in your own country, in your own community. But some of them may give you ideas as well. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a thing called psychologically informed environments. It's sometimes abbreviated to PIE, P-I-E. And this is a project that's been set up in a hostel for people who have been homeless. And the idea is that psychologists are placed in the hostel, so they work in the hostel as part of the team, but they're not delivering traditional talking therapy one-to-one things. That they are integrating into the life of the hostel. It's not a hospital, it's like a residential place for people to go. And they work with people to help them deal with their day-to-day challenges, and they also work on the communal life of of the hostel, so that they're contributing to the way that people experience living together. They give them quiet background support around their addictions or help towards gaining employment and so on. So the particular example is called the Waterloo Project. It's an 18-bed hospital in hostel. I keep saying hospital, it's not a hospital, in Lambeth, which provides accommodation and support to former rough sleepers with complex support needs. A key component of the project is an innovative psychology scheme, Psychology in Hospitals. It's run in partnership between South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, which is the mental health organisation, and Thames Reach, which is an organisation that delivers services to homeless people. And they have psychologists based full-time in that site. So it helps the residents to address issues exacerbated by their living on the street, such as substance misuse and mental health problems. So, does anybody have any examples of anything similar in your own experience or work? No?
Yeah, we have our own society.
Yeah?
And is run by peers.
Right.
And we are just doing whatever you want or need. Whatever you need at that time, we try to provide it, and we do it together. And apart from that, there's recovery courses.
And is that in a hostel kind of environment?
No, we are just in a building. Above us is a caring apartments for people that need special care.
Right.
And we are also providing them with activities.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we get a shortcut on the rent, or we get less rent because we are.
Yeah, that's a really good scheme then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's not. It's not psychology professionals who are going in and doing it. Yeah, and it's quite interesting to me as somebody who works in a funding organisation. We have recently had an application from a different organisation who's wanting to do similar kind of work, also psychologically informed environments, but for people who are being discharged from inpatient settings, including forensic settings. So they are people with very complex needs, and they have set up these residential units to help people reintegrate with psychology support within the residential unit, but in that kind of subtle, low-key way. It doesn't say, "Come on, it's time for your appointment." It's almost like a naturally occurring thing. So it's like a conversation between the clients and the worker. And the people who are providing the psychological support are seen as workers. They're not seen as sort of Dr. So-and-so who's coming in to pronounce on what needs to be done. So there's one example of where the environment actually dictates the character of the service that's being provided. So it's in a particular place where the service is perceived to be sort of organic in there. It's not an imposed thing that's been parachuted in. So I'm going to pass these bits of paper around if you just want to have a quick buzz through them and see what you think. And if anything else occurs to you about that, then just let me know. There are quite a few initiatives, and I think this is happening in many other places. I know Václav's will probably have something to tell us about this, where working in the outdoors, in green spaces and growing things, particularly growing fruit and vegetables that can be eaten by the people who are involved in it, provides a very sound therapeutic environment. And I've got two examples here. One is quite an ancient, well, it's not ancient, it's probably close to 100 years old. It's a walled garden, very, very big space, so it's got a stone-built wall around it from the early 20th century that was set up as a garden within the grounds of the Bethlehem Hospital, which is it's the oldest psychiatric hospital in the UK. It's moved around from one location to another over the centuries, and it's now settled in a place called Beckenham in Kent. And when that hospital was new in 1926, they built this garden as a place for patients to grow vegetables and fruit and so on. And as fashions changed, it fell into disuse and disrepair, and some of the walls fell down. But the man who's the head of occupational therapy on that site had the vision to see that this might be a useful resource for people, and he had it renovated, and it's now a thriving gardening project. Gardening sounds a little bit trivial, because it's actually very serious fruit and vegetable growing right through the year, and so they produce seasonal fruit and vegetables, and they make things like jam and chutney and so on from the produce, and they sell them to people who work there, or visitors in the local community and so on. And it's very successful, not only as a way of patients getting fresh air and exercise, but also sometimes in quite deliberately therapeutic ways. So, for example, if people have got OCD and they have an aversion to touching dirty things, and they don't like getting mud on their hands, for example, and they use that as part of the therapy, so that people can be encouraged to try challenging things and get used to getting their hands dirty and then cleaning them again and discovering that it's not as bad as they thought it might be. They in the process of setting up that garden, they also discovered that there was a whole lot of fruit trees on the site that had also fallen into disrepair. So there's an orchard with apples and pears and some other fruit as well. And they worked with I think it's called the London Orchard Society to have that orchard repaired. I'm not sure exactly what the right word is, but they brought it back into use. So the trees were quite badly neglected, and they've recovered to such an extent now that they reap the apples regularly and make apple juice and various other products from them. There was a cider company that was very interested in buying the fruit, but they decided in the end that it wasn't appropriate because of the fact that the trust also provides addiction services, and they thought it was not a good idea to feed the alcohol manufacturing industry. So here's some examples of stuff from that project. Then we have another agricultural project, not agricultural, horticultural project. This is sorry, I should have said the people who access that Bethlehem Walled Garden project are people who, in the main, are resident on that site, and so they're people who are being treated for a wide range of different conditions. And there's also a forensic unit on the site, and people from that forensic unit are also included in the activity. that hospital is also noted for its national services, so national specialist services. So they provide treatments for people from all over the country whose local provision hasn't been able to meet their needs. So if that's the case, then they sometimes end up at these highly specialised units, and that's where some of the most successful access of that project comes from. And the other project that we have, which I know Connie's visited, it's called the Grounding Project. They changed the name since you were there. So this is a project that's provided for people who've been traumatized through, mainly originally through war, and it was people from refugees from Kosovo, from that Balkan terrible period. But it's also now includes refugees from other parts of the world as well. And they provide what they describe as psychoeducation and horticultural therapy. And it was originally placed in a city farm. So this is a little farm, but right in the middle of the city. It was in Vauxhall, just south of the Thames. And they've moved recently to another provision, which is actually much better than the one they had before. It's away from any kind of clinical services. You wouldn't imagine that had anything to do with health or mental health, because it's I don't know how you would describe it, because London's quite a difficult place to describe. It's not exactly suburban, but it's away from the city centre, but not very far. So if you know London at all, it's very near Elephant and Castle, which is sort of a few stops on the tube from the centre. And it's hidden away, but it's this little paradise of green stuff going on. And it's a project that's been developed for lots of different groups who need some kind of retreat and escape from the pressures of what's bothering them. So they have people with learning disabilities who come to do particular kinds of work there. They have teenagers who've been excluded from school because of their really bad behaviour, and then we have this group of refugees, and it's become a very powerful tool in those people's recovery. And one of the times I visited it recently, one of the women there said, because they've all been displaced from where they were before, she said to me, "This is my family now." And they're people from all over the world, but they have a sort of common bond, and they don't kind of dwell on what's been bad in their lives. They dwell on all they concentrate on the positive things, and the kind of life-giving properties of growing food and share. Then they every time they meet, they harvest something from what they've been growing, and they incorporate it into a meal that they prepare to get together and eat together. And I know somewhere else where that happens, just down the road from here.
And how is it financed?
That was it. Okay, yeah, I should have said that about the first two. The Psychology in Hostels project, when it started out a few years ago, it was funded through a number of grants from charities. So they had a very big grant from Guy's and St Thomas's charity, which is one of the major health charities in London. And then I'm from Maudsley charity. We contributed a bit of a kind of bridge to that funding. And then last year they were under threat of being closed because of the lack of funding. But in the meantime, they received an award. It was the Mayor of London's award for homelessness project. And I think it was £20,000 they got in this prize. And they almost had to say at this event, I was at the event when they got the award, they almost had to say, thank you, but we've been closed down, so you can give the money to somebody else. But fortunately, one of the local commissioning groups, I think, were embarrassed into saying, yes, we'll support you. And so they are funded through mainstream funding from the mental health commissioners. Then the walled garden project is it's funded in an odd way because it's partly funded through mainstream funding from the hospital, but we as a charity also prop it up a bit by paying for the horticultural therapist who is there. She's not there full time, she's there a few days a week. So that's how that's funded. This one, the grounding project for the refugees, is funded as a mainstream service. So it's one of the psychology talking therapy services that's offered by the trust. But we pay for the cost of the place that they're using. So what we pay for makes the difference, I think, to them. Because if we didn't pay for that, they would probably be put in a horrible room in the corner of a hospital somewhere. And that's absolutely what those people don't need. They don't need to be anywhere near a hospital. They need to be as far away from a hospital as they possibly can be. And I think that's what makes it work for them. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about the funding. Because that is important. Has anybody heard of something called men's sheds? It's an Australian phenomenon, and it was recognised that a lot of men with mental health problems are at risk of suicide, and this was an initiative that was set up to encourage groups of men to come together to do the kinds of things that men enjoy doing in sheds, which is making stuff or tinkering with machinery or whatever, and encouraging them to talk about their feelings and themselves, which is a thing that commonly men are very bad at doing. They're very bad at talking about emotional things, and this project is another one that happens at the same place as the walled garden. This is kind of slightly off track from what I'm trying to demonstrate, because I'm trying to show how quite a lot of these projects are particularly successful because they're not located in a clinical environment. Well, this one is on a hospital site, but it's situated in a professional standard woodwork workshop, and the man who runs the project is a joiner, a carpenter, and he's a very skillful teacher as well. So what he does is he facilitates these groups of men who come together from different parts of the hospital environment. So some of them are in the forensic services, others are there because they have very severe mental health conditions that have been treated, so some of them have been there for quite a long time, and others are live in the community with or without support, but they come back for this experience and opportunity. And the activity consists of the guys, it's all men in this particular thing. They come in and they each have, they can have a personal project, so that they might, there was one guy who was making boxes with decorated lids, and there was somebody else who made various things like placemats, for example, that were decorated with a hot iron engraving. And then they also have commissions from charities, like making bird boxes, bird tables, wooden planting troughs and things like that. So they have a variety of different opportunities in there, and they also have the opportunity to
almost done. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so halfway through the session, they'll have a break and have tea and biscuits, and that's when they have the opportunity just to talk about their feelings or whatever. And the last time I went, they really opened up to me. It was quite funny though, it was almost as though they'd been primed by the Man Who Runs the group to tell me how fantastic it was and that it should go on forever, because they knew that I was the person who, well, I don't actually hand out the money, but I'm part of the process of funding. But they were really very eloquent about talking about how much it meant to them. You know, there were people there who said if they didn't come to that group, they would have absolutely no contact with anybody else. It was their only contact with other people during the week. And there were others who saw it as a potential employment opportunity or self-employment opportunity for them when they were discharged from the services. So there we go. There's the men's shed. How do they find the opportunity?
Yeah.
So it's under the management of the occupational therapy unit on that site, which feeds into all of the different units that there are. It's a very, very big hospital with different levels of provision. So some of it is quite heavy duty stuff, and some of it is more of a light touch. But the occupational therapy is like a central resource that people can use. And there are a variety of other projects that don't have this qualification that I was looking for when I was selecting projects to talk about. So they have music projects and art. There's another one that's just next door to this one where they have pottery as a main activity, and textiles was also quite popular. And yeah, actually there was a very good project that it could have happened anywhere, I suppose. So it was the nature of the activity rather than the place that was important there, where people were paid to come and make things. So it could be pottery things or textiles, and the idea is that they would make them to a brief. So they would be told you need to use. They agreed amongst themselves and came up with the designs, but they would use a relatively limited range of designs so that they could produce products that had an identity. And so they, although they were all different, they all had something in common, and so they could sell them as this was like a set of teacups, for example, that had similar designs on them, but they weren't exactly the same. So they had quite a lot of distinct character, but they nevertheless had a kind of collective identity. One of our most famous projects is one that's called Raw Sounds. It's a music project in Brixton, and some people from here, some of these people have been there and experienced it firsthand. So this is a project that provides a wide range of musical opportunities to people mainly who either are still accessing a hospital provision in the area, or who are in the community or have been referred to them by traditional mental health services. They operate in their own premises that are far away from any kind of hospital or clinical environment, and it's the most amazing place because I think it's about either 3 or 4 floors, and on each floor there's different activities. So the recording studios, rehearsal spaces, rooms for DJing, rooms for doing computer music technology stuff. And they have a fantastic following of people of all sorts of abilities and expertise, and it's been a very good area for the development of peer expertise. So people have come in as referred patients, if you like, and developed their skills and ended up becoming teachers on that program. And they operate a kind of school term system. So that 3 times a year they work towards producing something at the end, and at the end of every term they put on a live performance that's usually in a local pub, and it's a very lively affair, and there's always food provided as well. So that's an important aspect of quite a lot of these things. It's quite difficult to describe, but if you go to visit the project, you're just overwhelmed by the joy coming out from people's involvement in it.
What happens there that they are so all filled with joy or happiness or whatever? What is it then?
It's because it's run as a really professional thing. It's not just fiddling around. So they take it really seriously, and the people who are teaching and facilitating the activities are really good at what they do. They are not mental health professionals, so they have quite a good and sophisticated understanding of mental health needs, but they're not there to provide for people's mental health needs. They're there to provide them as a community resource and to develop their skills and interests and to help them make connections with other people who have similar interests. And so from that point of view, it's really exciting to see how they grow into a community of musicians.
That's another starting point.
It is, yeah. So they develop a new identity. They develop an identity which says, I'm a musician. It doesn't say, I'm a client or I'm a patient who's dabbling a bit with music. And that's the way it's approached by the people who run the project. So the funding for this one is provided through their own fundraising efforts. So they have somebody there who is applying for funding all the time. And we as a charity have funded them quite regularly. But they don't rely entirely on the money that they get from us. Our money is a contribution to their overall costs. There you go. So I think I wouldn't like to say that the kind of musical activity that happens here was inspired by the Raw Sounds project, but it was certainly there was certainly some spark there from when people visited, because I know Tom and Dirk were always have had music as a very important part of what they do. So I think going and seeing these people working and going to their live performances just made them think, yeah, we could do something like that. It's very different, but nevertheless, there's a connection has been made, and I think that's the important thing about all of this, is that we can learn from each other and be inspired, but not necessarily copy something. And that's one of the things that I've become aware of over the last years that I've been involved with this organisation, is that people are very good at recognising something when they see it happening somewhere else and saying, we could do something like that in our community, and then they go back and they do something that's unique in their own circumstances, and you would never say, oh, they've copied such and such a thing, because it belongs to that community and it's grown out of that community. Yeah. Okay, here's another project that's aimed at a very different client group, and this is aimed at people with dementia. It was recognised by certain people working in this environment that the staff, particularly the nursing staff, were often not very aware of people's life stories. They didn't know much about somebody other than that they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that, or they couldn't remember this and they couldn't. It was all about what they couldn't do, not about what they could do, and it wasn't about what they had achieved in their lives. It was what they had lost in their lives. And this project was an inspirational thing, I think. I'm not sure quite how the idea developed, but it's a thing called Journeys of Appreciation, and it's a project where the old people with dementia and the people who are looking after them, and again that's predominantly nurses, get out from the hospital environment or the residential unit where they're based, and they go out to museums and art galleries and work with the people who facilitate community activity in those organisations. And they do things like handle the objects or sets of objects in the museums. And they talk about them and discover things about the objects and their history and so on. And the whole idea of it is not that they'll learn something about this strange thing that somebody's found in their backyard. It's so that the patients and the carers talk to each other and learn more about each other. So they do that in museums where they handle objects, but they also do it in art galleries where the pictures and sculptures are the basis of the conversation. And one of the stories that came out of one of these was people went to the Dulwich Picture Gallery, which is it's a big gallery near where I work, and one of the old men in the group said, I used to be a coach driver, and I used to bring parties of people to this gallery to come and look at the pictures, and none of the staff knew that he had been a coach driver, or of course that they didn't know that he had brought people to that gallery. So that was an example where suddenly they had a richer understanding of what that man was all about. Not that he was a man who dribbled and couldn't feed himself, but somebody who had a story to tell and to share. Yeah, this project's attracted quite a lot of attention. It's an interesting one. For lots of reasons. I took somebody, one of the trustees of our charity, to observe a session, and we came away from it, and she said, I didn't think that was very good. And it's one of those things where you go for a one-off visit to something, and it doesn't quite live up to what you've heard about it, because in the particular session that she observed, they were looking at pictures that had been printed on A4 flat pieces of paper, and in the course of the discussion, I pointed out to it, actually, people with dementia often find it quite difficult to interpret flat images of what would normally be 3D objects, and that's exactly what was happening there. They weren't properly engaging with what had been done there. But then, in the later part of the same session, they were taken around the museum where they could actually observe the real objects and not pictures of them, and the whole experience changed completely because they could see the real thing and relate to it far better. So that one is funded, it's provided within the hospital services, but it's been funded entirely by the charity. Which is always a problem with this kind of activity, because the funding runs out, and then what happens? In this particular instance, they are finding ways of keeping some aspects of the idea going. And there's also been a big reorganisation in that department, and so they're now not only dealing with older people, but they're dealing with people with younger people with different conditions. And so what they're trying to do is learn from what they've done with the older people and try to introduce it with different groups of people in slightly different ways, and possibly less expensive ways, because the whole it's fraught with difficulty, this project, because every time they go out they have to hire a bus to take the people safely from one place, from where they live, to the gallery or the museum where they're visiting. So there are all sorts of health and safety things that kick in and challenge people.
And is it a good connection with the museums and the galleries in this? Or
Very.
How did it...
Very, very good. So they it's quite interesting actually, because I've been personally challenged this week by the fact that we have had a deadline for funding applications yesterday, and so I've had to read 60-something proposals for funding, and 2 very good ones have come in from the museums where these people have been participating, because they've learned from each other, and so they've said we can do more as museums and galleries to engage with people who have one kind of difficulty or another. And so one of the galleries, the one where the coach driver used to go, they've come up with an idea where they want to work with teenagers to help to... I haven't absorbed the whole detail of it yet, but basically they want to work with teenagers to develop their skills as sort of facilitators for other young people who might want to come into that environment. And then the other one is another local museum, which actually I will tell you what it is, because it's the Horniman Museum. If you ever get the opportunity to go there, it's also in South London. It's a really interesting museum because it has, and it's got this fantastic gardens around it as well, with lots of interesting botanical specimens. But it's got a very unusual collection of different types of things. So they've got a huge collection of musical instruments, for example, but they have all sorts of Eastern stuff, and they also have wildlife provision. So there's it's one of those places where there's something for everyone, and it's run very well as something as an organisation that engages particularly well with the community, and it engages with people of all ages as well. So they have provision for really tiny children and very old people. So they are applying to work that will train mental health professionals to be able to do some of that kind of work themselves. So, please don't worry about the bits of paper. And if there's anything that anybody wants to take away, then please do. I'm sorry, I've only brought one copy.
Can I ask you a question about the project that you last time told about?
Yeah.
The dementia, people with dementia. How do the people get into this kind of program? Are they can say for themselves, I want to come into it, or were they put into it by other?
I'm not sure that a lot of them are very, very unwell people, so I'm not sure how much they would be able to say, I want to go.
Yeah, I was imagining this.
Yeah, so I think they selected to some extent. Okay. So they people who have been identified as ones who would probably benefit from it most. But also, I think the staff that go are selected in that way because it's perceived that, for example, Joe, the healthcare assistant, isn't making an effort to find out about the people that he's working with. So they'll say, you take Mrs. What's-her-name to the museum this week, and they hope to get that connection going there.
To get a story or a part of a story.
Yeah. There's been quite a lot of work done on using reminiscence therapy, or sometimes it's called life story work, where they use old songs or film clips or newspapers and so on to try and trigger memories from people and get them talking about things. And sometimes they'll end up making a scrapbook of stuff that they've collected and can relate to. Right, here's another gallery related project, which is an actual gallery. It's known as it's called the Bethlehem Gallery. It's also on the same site as the Bethlehem Hospital, and this is a project that picks up with people who have demonstrated that they have a particular artistic talent, and it nurtures them and helps them develop careers as artists. And then there is an actual gallery where they have regular exhibitions that are, and the gallery is open to the public. There are a lot of people who have passed through that gallery provision over the years, and quite a lot of them have become quite famous in their own right, whether or not they have a mental health background. But sometimes their experience of mental health challenges influenced what kind of work they produce. But others that they just become very good artists. I think the important thing about it, as far as the sense of place is concerned, is that it's not just a back room somewhere. It's a really high quality, professional standard gallery, and it makes people feel and believe and realise that they can do what they aspire to do. So yeah, there we go. And then the last two examples, they're both cafes, and I know cafes have been referred to several times. The very famous developments, I think you'll probably hear more about them over the course of the next 2 days in other countries. This one's called the Dragon Cafe. Anybody heard of the Dragon Cafe? Yes. You've been there, haven't you? Yes. Yes, you've been there. Connie's been there. Anybody else been there? You've been there? Yes. That's right. Yes. Yeah. So this is an interesting phenomenon for me. It was. Sorry, let's just go back. The Bethlehem Gallery. Sorry, so don't forget about the funding. Is it's an independent charity that's actually linked to the charity that I work for. So we provide nearly all of their funding. They get a small amount of funding from other places. The Dragon Cafe was set up by an organisation called Mental Fight Club, which is a group of people who all had lived experience of mental health difficulties, and it's quite an interesting story actually. If you look them up, the name Mental Fight Club comes from the conflation of two things: the film Fight Club and a poem by a poet called Ben Okri called Mental Fight, and so they combined those two things together into Mental Fight Club. And when they started out, they had various short-term projects that had some kind of artistic flavour to them, often event-based things. And the inspirational woman behind it, Sarah Wheeler, came up with the idea of having a cafe, but it wasn't a. Sorry, you want. Those are bits to do with the gallery. It wasn't just a cafe that provided food. It was a whole set of activities, and I think that this is a project that's closest to what happens here, to some extent. So they have a cafe, which is a kitchen in the corner of where this project happens, and where it happens is interesting because it's in the crypt of a church in Borough, so it's near London Bridge, if you know where that is. So it's down some stairs at the back of the church, you basically underground in this, and it's two big rooms joined together. I suppose together they less than the size of these two, I think. And they provide food and drink throughout the day. But there's a huge program of stuff going on. And sorry, I think I may have mixed some things up here. They have a whole lot of activities going on throughout the day. So this is a program from a few weeks ago. So all day, this is on Monday the 6th of May, all day there are exhibitions on around the building. And then from 12 to 4 you can have a massage. It's like a back and shoulders and arm massage. You can do creative writing. You can do singing, Tai Chi, crochet, dance, I think, chess, chess. And then more music, it's like an open mic session. And then on that particular evening, they were going to have a disco party in the evening. So quite a range of activities. And they have some things that are consistent that happen every week, and then they also have a changing program of stuff. And they also incorporate something called Recreate Psychiatry, which is a series of debates and sort of discussion events with usually quite young psychiatrists and other mental health professionals talking together with people who use their services and trying to find the common ground and move towards a different way of interpreting psychiatry and psychiatric needs. So one of the interesting things for me about this place is, first of all, where it is. So it's in this urban environment, but it's hidden away. It's open to anybody, by the way, so you don't have to prove that you have a mental health difficulty or anything, and it's accessed by anybody who wants to go and feels at home there. But the other thing is, it only happens once a week. So it happens on every Monday, apart from when they close for a few weeks in the summer. And that was done deliberately because they didn't want it to take on the characteristic of being daycare, where people would go every day and rely on it being there. And that, what do you do? Oh, I go to the Dragon Cafe. The idea was that it would be there as a once a week opportunity for people to meet together, do things together, find other people with similar interests, and then go and do something else for the rest of the week. And people were encouraged and helped to find other activities that they could engage with in that local community. It's been very interesting how that the cafe has been adopted by the local community. It's a very strange community because it's a sort of commercial area, but there's a very famous market there called Borough Market. Has anybody been to Borough Market? Connie's been there. It's in all the tourists' books, and it's kind of flocked out by tourists, but it has a very cosmopolitan provision. But they've adopted the Dragon Cafe, and so they have this scheme where at the end of the day, when there's food left over, it gets donated to the cafe, and they use it there. And there are other businesses that have also recognised the value. As was described about this place, where initially there's a bit of suspicion, what are these strange people coming to do in our neighbourhood? And then people realise, actually, this is fantastic stuff, and so they start contributing, and so people go in from local businesses and volunteer there, or actually give physical stuff to them. It's quite an odd thing having a one-day provision like that, because they don't own the space, they only use it on that day. And so they spend the first part of every Monday setting it up, so putting out all the tables, putting all sorts of stuff on the walls, the displays and exhibitions. And then at the end of the day, they pack it all up and put it away, and it gets brought out again the next time. So it's quite a labour-intensive provision. Their funding started out coming entirely from charitable funds. So they got money from Guy's and St Thomas's Charity, which was their most local charity, and they got quite a lot of money from our charity. They have developed amazing fundraising skill, and so they are now almost awash with money. They've been so successful in accessing funding. So usually they get a little bit of money from us, but they get most of their money from other sources. People don't pay to use the facility, but they do pay for the food and drink, which is, it's actually not particularly cheap, but it's very good quality stuff. And that's the Dragon Cafe. Yeah.
Is it from the very beginning when it starts, it's already on every Monday?
Yes.
You've never had like a full week to...
No. So they that was their idea. Right from the beginning, they would only do it on 1 day a week. The only way in which they've diverged from that original plan is they've had some pop-up cafes. So they did one for a period in a local college, where they worked with the college because the college had identified that there were quite a lot of people there who had mental health needs that weren't being who weren't being helped in any way, and they saw this as an opportunity for people to engage on something that was quite subtle and not a therapeutic service, but just something that might make things a bit easier for some of the people. And that was quite successful, but it was it involved a lot of extra work for the people who were providing it, and the funding for it was quite unstable, and also, as so often happens, the person in the college who had the idea to do it moved on, and so that it left a hole there. So often these things rely on the inspiration of one or a few people. Actually, that's another interesting thing about the Dragon Cafe. The person who conceived it and worked tirelessly to make it happen actually died just over a year ago, and the people around them could just have crumbled and said, well, Sarah's gone now, so that's the end of it. But they didn't. They actually got together and strengthened the whole thing, and so it's more viable now than it had ever been before. This next cafe is an unusual one too, in that it's situated in the middle of a secure forensic unit. And the idea for this came through very imaginative occupational therapy people in there, who came up with the idea of it's part of the requirement of forensic mental health provision that the people who are in the insecure units should be helped to develop their vocational skills, so improving their literacy and numeracy, for example, but also developing very specific skills. And so they came up with the idea of training people to become professional level baristas, and so that they developed this cafe idea, and it provides basic snacks like panini kind of sandwiches and the full range of professionally made coffees that you might expect in a good cafe. And the interesting thing about this one is that it was entirely developed with the service users. So they, for example, chose the name of the cafe they designed the menus, chose all the colours, everything that you could possibly think of was developed by by doing surveys and questionnaires and focus groups and so on with the people in there, so that they were all part of it. And as a result of that, as soon as it emerged as a real entity, everybody was very enthusiastic about working in it or using it as customers. The design of it is very interesting, and I hope you'll get a flavour from it from this pack that was produced by the staff who developed it. Because it's a secure unit and people are effectively kept indoors unless they're being taken out into the yard for exercise and so on. They try to turn it around so that it felt like it was outside. It felt like a kind of al fresco thing. So the walls are decorated in such a way that it looks like brick, like the outside of a house or of a commercial building. And there are plants and things in there that's also designed to create the effect. So it's not exactly an illusion, because you can't really pretend that you're outdoors, but it has this kind of outdoor effect, which is very clever. And there you go. Sorry, that belongs with that as well. Okay, and then the last example, which I think is something that's probably very well known to most people, is the local recovery college. And I've included this one here because although it's called a recovery college, it doesn't have a building, because they took the decision right from the outset that they weren't going to be associated with any kind of clinical environment. And so all of the classes, I shouldn't say all, I think there are some exceptions, but nearly all of the classes are delivered in community venues that have nothing to do with health or mental health. So they're in other places where people can feel that they're part of the community. Yeah, I think that's probably all I want to say, because I'm not going to claim anything unique about that particular recovery college. It's a very good one, but it's not hugely different. So I've done lots of spouting. Anybody want to tell me about something similar or something really different that you've been involved in or you've experienced?
I might share the No Big Drama project,
Tell us.
which won last year's Prize winner.
Yeah.
The point is, we are a peer support group that meets in a theater on a stage, because the original idea is that the stage is a place where emotions are expressed, where stories are told, where you dare to be creative, and passing days and sessions and so on. I see this as an important and kind of a crucial aspect of the project of the group, because just imagine a small theater, kind of 40 places. It's totally dark, just light spots on the stage where chairs are. So it's kind of intimacy. The darkness is kind of offering the space to step back, to not join what's actually happening, to observe it, and to join it when I feel comfortable and safe again. So I like the light and dark aspect of it.
Yeah.
And of course, there is space to on the stage. There's space to move, to maybe dance, to play games, and yeah, it's just I see it as it works.
Yeah, thank you. Václav, do you want to tell us what you do?
Well, it was just in the beginning. It's now idea is coming to be real. It's like to get some psycho because it's less of professional help in our country. We are trying to get some therapeutic skills to directly to the peer groups, to peer support. As it's like a Dragon Fight Club, but it's like just with individuals. It was not like the stone house where you are coming, but it's this. I'm calling like nomad therapy. This therapist coming to the home and starting with working and to get the clients going out. It's like second or third session will be in the house, in the workplace, and then second part is like emotional wellness. It's calling like emotional wellness. It's very similar to psychology in the hostel, but it's called small, short time, not accommodation, short time. It's being in some like hotels or some hostel or in it's pensions or something like this, or apartments in the nature as you are coming through the weekend or some week, and you are going some wellness, how to say it's wellness walking or some program. It's like physical. Second day it's like a group therapy and with possibilities individual session on Sunday. And we are just trying to combine it, but it's problem with the money now mostly, because I'm just thinking how do we get the money, because it's not now, it's for people with long-term problems, if they are on some on benefits or somewhere. And mostly now we are trying to get some accreditation for the trainings, not training, but it's like not long term, but it's half-year training for these peers and clients by itself to get some therapeutic or crisis intervention skills directly to people with experience or families or parts, and they should support people indirectly as a first step. It's not coming to the professionals. I hope that we will get it back, because it's, for example, in Prague is social clinics where people were working, it's people in the psychotherapeutic trainings and working for very, very less money. It's like free for people who has some mental problems, but it's not just only for mental health people. It was just people for in the beginning, because we have the mostly problems with the middle, with people who are still at work, but going down with mental problems, and we have services for long-term people, but not from people in beginning. But if they are going to the hospital, they are stigmatized, and it's like it's finished. But it's very, very new, and I am not sure that is the mostly also it's mental health people. It's don't it's believe in this, in some changes. Because it's, if you want, you can speak about it.
Thank you. Conrad, do you want to tell us about your inspirational environment?
Yeah, okay. Well, as you told, I think 5 years ago or even longer, I was in London because I had a small project at my hometown, and I had a recovery trip, and I visited several places, and all of them had a bit of the idea I had in my head, and it gave such a power. I was there at the time with a colleague, and then 4.5 years ago, we opened our own, we made our own fund of our own foundation, non-profit foundation, Eagle Shelter, in our own village in Dongen. And we created it, I think Nijskoen is closest to our place. We only started with a high five and doing it, and then almost 2 years ago my colleague went a separate way and I rebuilt it again. That was one side, it was tough, and the other side I thought, well, I did it once, so I'm going to do it again. And the place is not me, just like was told today. I think a lot of things are similar with all the stories I heard today. People build it together. It started with our 2 stories at the time being 4.5 years ago, but now it's a house of stories, a house of hope. People create it together. All kind of activities are running through the days. We are open almost every day, even in the evenings. And one of the dreams is that it can also become a place where people can be there for several days to get more power, so they can use the space to stay there for a short period of time and then use the facilities. All kinds of people, you only have to walk through the door and you're a guest, but you're all volunteer at the same time. Everything is flat. So we make the place all together, and it starts by being there, being good as you are. You're okay, you're human, we are all human. We have things we can learn from each other, things you can bring into the place and things you can find there or learn there. So I think it's really great to be there almost every day and to see how people grow, how your story can be an example for someone else, and how we do it all together. I think, well, one of the main things I've learned is just start doing it. Believe in yourself, believe in your power. You don't have to start big. If you start, things grow. You attract things, you attract people, you attract everything, and just go for it. So that's how we started.
Apart from the inspirational thing that you have there, it's also interesting in that it's in quite a different setting. It's quite rural, isn't it? It's almost out in the country.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of growing things and animals. And
we have all kind of stuff. We are on one side we're connected to the village, and on the other side we're connected with nature. We have a big area around us, so we have horses there. We have our garden where we cook 3 times a week. We have a playing ground. A lot of people or children come to our place. We are really totally connected with the surroundings, with everything, but we built it up because we went into the village and invited everyone in. And well, I was very happy to hear the mayor, but that was exactly the same situation at our village. When there are questions, the mayor says, well, do you know how important the Eagle Shelter is? And so we are really connected. There is a switch in people, but also I think it's very important that you're not, I think that you learn people to look otherwise at what is strength and what is weak. Weak is not people who are using mental health. I think they are survivors, strong people. But when you bring people together, people who haven't been there, or people who say they have no issues. Everyone has issues. But I think if you connect people, really things are changing, and it's like a snowball. It's getting bigger. It's not between the walls of. I think in high school is the same. It doesn't stay between your walls. People change looking at each other, and someone says, well, otherwise I wouldn't have had that conversation with you because I would have thought I was small and you were big, and then someone else thinks, well, I'm not that big, I'm just human. So that's nice, and the connection is one side it's a village, other sides we are a free space where everything happens. The door goes open in the morning, I don't know, there are 60 people every day. almost, and then in the evening there are groups, peer groups and things like that. You don't count them because then there are even more people, but you don't know what's going to happen or what idea is going to happen that day, and that's really great, of what people meet that day or what things will grow, and that's the power of the space. You do it all together. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else want to tell us about?
Nobody.
Time for tea.
Hours and 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.